What's going on, everybody? Justin Turpin here with Tom Carroll, live from TD Garden, where the Celtics just beat the Utah Jazz 114-108. And Tom, not exactly the amount of hype surrounding this one as there was Saturday night, but nonetheless, the Celtics come away with a win. That's their fourth straight, now 6-1 on this homestand. And we'll start with the big story tonight, and that's Sam Hauser. Last week, when Peyton Pritchard had his 40-point night, he said it could have been anyone that did it, and it was just his night, and they played within the game, and the ball found him. And then a week later, less than a week later, Sam Hauser, career-high 33 points, and I think that was the big story tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really cool that Hauser was 1 for 7 at one
in the
point.
First half.
And then the third quarter comes, and he just gets incredibly hot. They keep giving him the ball, and he's the type of guy that when he gets hot, they're just going to keep feeding him. And I liked that even though towards the fourth, after, his barrage in the third quarter, he just kept firing. And that's the type of mentality you want Hauser to have headed towards the postseason. When he's in the game, he needs to shoot. That's why he's on the team.
And I was doing a live track on Twitter where I just kept post-tweeting it because there was really nothing else going on
at that point in the game.
Yeah, at this point, it's Sam Hauser starting to get going. He outscored the Jazz by himself in the third quarter, which is incredible, and had 7 threes, which set a franchise record for the Celtics for most in a quarter. And it feels like that's a record he should own. Just a little sidebar on that. But I'm doing the record counter, and I'm just like, when he makes 4 threes, they get better and better the more threes that Sam Hauser makes. And it's usually a good indicator of how this team's playing, because when and Joe Mazzulla kind of said it after the game, which I thought was really interesting. They're not really plays for him, right? He's like, there's not many plays in the playbook for Sam Hauser. It just kind of naturally happens. And I thought that was interesting from Joe, because either he's just completely lying, which he's shown a tendency to do, especially at these press conferences, or it's true, because the Celtics really, their whole offense revolves around creating 2-on-1 advantages and finding different weaknesses to exploit. And when Sam Hauser's on the floor, those 2-on-1 advantages aren't really towards Sam Hauser unless they're closing out on him when he's hot. So when he gets in that rhythm, though, you're absolutely right. He is so dangerous.
Yeah, and I think both things are true. I think Mazzulla is probably lying a little bit, sure. And there probably isn't that many plays for Sam Hauser in the playbook. Why would there be? You have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Drew Holiday, KP. I mean, of course there's not going to be a lot of plays for Sam Hauser, right?
And you mentioned Drew Holiday, and this won't be the front page of anyone's story or whatever. No one's really going to talk about this, but that steal at the end. I mean, that's just classic Drew Holiday.
That's what he does.
And it was out of reach. It was already, the game was kind of decided. It was their final possession. But for him to get that steal times in the press box, his fingers in a split, and it's completely straight. And that's not easy to do as a basketball player, especially on his dominant hand. His shot looks good.
Yeah, his shot looks good, and I think he's playing like Drew Holiday. He doesn't look like he's hampered at all. He's playing defense the way he plays defense, passing, dribbling. Like, if you didn't know he had that, you would not know he has the mallet finger, which sounds like a World War II injury, right? Like, it doesn't sound like a thing you want to have. But I thought watching Drew Holiday the last few games here, he has looked like Drew Holiday of last postseason. And as the season has gone along, it seems like he has gotten back into more playoff-ready shape. Yeah. I feel like earlier in the year, you could kind of see a little bit of his age for the first time, maybe in his entire career. And it seems like he's getting back more into that championship form.
That's the thing with Drew. And Joe actually talked about this at practice last week, where they're well aware that he played almost 100 games last year. Well, the team itself played over 100. I think it was 101 last year when you include the finals run. So he had a longer season, then went to the Olympics, and they're not shying away that he's getting up there in age. And
he put in serious minutes in Paris.
Right. And
not like Tatum.
Part of that. And he sprained his ankle at one point.
Right.
So he had a little bit of injury there. But they are not shying away from the fact that Drew Holiday isn't the spring chicken anymore. And I think Al Horford's done it at times too, where they're ramping up for the season. Those guys aren't going to be going 100% in December or January, but we're really starting to ramp them up. And I've maintained the belief the entire time that once we get to the postseason, Drew Holiday is going to arrive. That's why they went out and got him. Brad Stevens had a smile on his face the entire time when they brought Drew Holiday in for his introductory press conference. That's the thing too, is Svi Mykhailiuk, who got his ring tonight, which was a cool moment, having everyone out at midcourt to greet him for that. He was asked before the game, when did you know this was a championship team? When we got Drew Holiday.
I mean, they got him for nothing. When they got Drew Holiday, you almost had to just laugh at that point because they had just brought in Porzingis, and that was kind of like a okay, if Porzingis, you get the ceiling of Porzingis, this team is going to be incredible. And then they just got Drew Holiday.
I mean, it's funny that we're still talking about this.
It's wild.
A year and a half. They already won the championship. This was a year and a half ago. And it's now like Drew Holiday is a Celtic. He's been a Celtic. But it's still mind-blowing to think that Milwaukee had to have known there was a chance that he got rerouted to Boston and that was going to be collateral damage, that he was going to end up a Celtic. And just the comparisons between the two teams of where Boston's at versus where Milwaukee's at. And every time it's just Drew Holiday when there's close games, when the game's on the line, with the exception of the Atlanta game earlier in the regular season, this guy is going to make plays.
Yeah, and it's funny, when he was leaving Milwaukee fans were kind of happy about it in a weird way. They were like ready to be done with Drew Holiday. He was a guy that was taking a little bit of the blame in the postseason for not winning another title in those years after they won the title.
Not those guys.
They're never going to blame Giannis, but Drew was kind of the fall guy. So they were like, see you later. We're glad to have Dame. He comes here, and now Boston looks like they're going to have a 2-3 year window where they're going to own the Eastern Conference.
And one thing I think is important to note with Drew Holiday, especially playing through this mallet finger, is he noted that why he was sitting earlier when he missed a couple games because of it was due to pain management. And for him to play tonight, after playing against the Lakers his first game back, and tonight against, Joe Mazzulla will never admit that one game means more than the other. Don't ever tell him that, because he will laugh in your face. It's clear that this one wasn't as important as Thursday or Saturday night, and it's not as important as Wednesday night when Oklahoma City comes to town. And it's just funny because at one point in the third quarter, the Jumbotron showed a guy sleeping on the Jumbotron.
So good.
So for him to be able to play in that game, managing that pain, that's a good sign, I think. And I'm not a doctor, but that's a good sign.
No, absolutely. That's just common sense. Right. And, you mentioned Saturday night. Jason Tatum played 46 minutes in a regular season game on Saturday night. That, clearly Mazzulla knows that game mattered. And
they admitted it after the game.
Yeah, and look, the Lakers are a team that need to get through a gauntlet of a West to get to the finals. But Mazzulla, knowing what that rivalry means and knowing that the Lakers have raised their ceiling immensely after being gifted Luka Doncic. If we're talking about these gifts
the
that we're giving out
rivalry.
Here,
that's what it was.
It truly was. So yeah, Saturday night meant a lot more than tonight. But with that said, the Celtics kind of needed to wake up mid-game here because they were sleepwalking through a blowout. And then, like Jalen said in his post-game presser, the Jazz started hitting those shots that the Celtics were kind of letting guys have. The guys that they wanted to shoot were missing early, and then they started hitting those late. And it was a nail-biter towards the end there, which actually got the crowd here as loud as I heard it on Saturday night towards the end.
And that's the thing, too, is that third quarter is so much more important than what Sam Hauser did in that third quarter. Scored 23 points, I think, off the top of my head. I don't have the box score in front of me. I think he scored 23 points. The Jazz scored 22. And you add in what the other players scored. So they ended up winning that quarter pretty big, which was huge because Utah came out and really dominated the fourth quarter, but they already had that cushion from the third. And I mean, it's funny because we were joking about it. Like, there was clutch minutes against the Utah Jazz at TD Garden. It's not something you really expect, but the Celtics just operated flawlessly. And shout out to Jaylen Brown too, because on the night he shot 6 of 20, but he was 2 of 3 in the fourth quarter. And when they needed big shots, he was there to make them. And this is when you see this team, right, especially against a team like the Jazz, who are at this point trying to lose, so it's kind of hard to give them too much credit, but they always find a way to execute down the stretch. And Jalen, to me, in these situations this year, looks so much more comfortable, and they're ready to execute down the stretch, and that's a sign of a championship team.
So I know on the radio locally, Tatum sometimes takes crap still for not being.
Does he?
Yeah, right?
Wow.
Weird. He sometimes still takes crap for not being one of the clutchest guys in the NBA.
Which the most clutch game-winning shots, go-ahead shots
he
since
just
coming
is.
into the league.
He just is, right? But I don't, as much crap that Tatum takes, I think Brown doesn't get enough credit for continuing to be as clutch as he is, even with the run that he had last postseason, winning both MVPs in the final 2 rounds. The guy, time and time again, makes the big play, makes the big shot, and it just has to have you feeling really good about the Celtics heading into this postseason. I know they had that blip mid-year, but it's impossible to expect a team to go 81-20 or whatever it was last season and then come out and play at that type of pace for an entire season. They had a normal malaise mid-season, they're rounding into form here. They played awesome in these games against the Nuggets and the Lakers. And now you got the Thunder on Wednesday. And that's the real litmus test here. If they can come out and get that win or have an awesome game, like go to OT with the Thunder and then whatever happens, I think this team's mentality to see, okay, look how we are against the big boys in the West. We have a weak Eastern Conference that we can now use that momentum to kind of ride our way through here to make another finals run.
And that game Wednesday night is going to be incredible because I thought the first half when they met earlier in the year, and shame on the NBA, I'm never going to forgive them for this. Well, I'll forgive them eventually. But in the short term right now, they scheduled that game on a Sunday afternoon against Week 18 of the NFL. And I just don't like the continued disrespect on the Thunder from the NBA. Like, it was no surprise that this team was going to compete in the Western Conference, yet they didn't play on Christmas, and they meet the Celtics during Week 18 of the NFL season at 3 o'clock in the middle of the busiest time of the NFL slate.
I remember sitting there in the Patriots press box, hating my life that I had to watch that atrocious performance by the Patriots, winning a game they should have lost while the Celtics were playing the Thunder. It was one of the worst days of the football season.
But the NBA does itself no favors, right? So for this to be a primetime ESPN Wednesday night, I think that's a good step in the right direction. And they're starting to give more attention to these teams. Like, I thought Saturday night was great for the league. Like, Adam Silver was probably the big winner sitting there. Actually, obviously, Nico Harris, tough night for him. But he's kind of watching. Watching Luka dominate offensively, but he's like, yeah, you know what? This looks a little bit familiar because they're just wearing him down. Jaylen Brown's clamping him. He's like, see, this is why I did it. But it's been good for the NBA, and I think Wednesday night will be another example. And obviously something to watch going into Wednesday night is the biggest story before Sam Hauser exploded in the second half was off the court. And Kristaps Porzingis provided an update on his illness, which has cost him now 6 of the last 7 games, 5 in a row, that it's a viral illness. They're not really quite sure what it is, and he's working his best to get back. That was the most we've really heard from it. For the most part, is Joe Mazzulla's just been like, yeah, he's not feeling well. He can't play. He's not feeling well enough. But to hear it's a viral thing, it is kind of a little bit scary that they don't really know what's going on. But you immediately think, like, is this like an pneumonia? Mm-hmm. Or is this something with like fluid in the lungs or something where a guy cannot go out and play 30, 40 minutes of basketball when that's the case?
Yeah, and we were talking with some friends that were covering the pregame locker room, and they said Porzingis was like hacking up a lung in there. And so it's clear that he's dealing with something, and he came out and said it finally. And, you know, when guys are injured, sometimes, oh, he's sick, or like, oh, it's just a rest day, but then something different's happening. So it was good to finally get that confirmation right from the horse's mouth, like, hey, yes, I am dealing with something. To me, it makes me feel better that it's something viral that in theory will go away, as opposed to a lingering ailment having to do with those alien-like legs that who the hell knows, you know, if they can hold up for a whole postseason. We hope and pray that he can, as people that want the Celtics to do well and win another title, because when he's right, this team is close to unstoppable in a 7-game series.
And we've seen that time and time again. And it's good to know that they have other guys that can step up. And it is so on brand, unfortunately, because you love watching him play. But he gets a mystery illness and now is like out for indefinitely, it seems. But it's good sign that he's been around the team. He's been, and I think that's part of it too. The fact that he's been around the team.
True. That people are like, contagious.
Oh, he can't be that sick if he's hanging out on the bench and is around the team. But clearly it is something that it's underlying a little bit, I guess. And eventually he will return to form. It's a good sign that he's been able to get warm-ups in. He got a good warm-up in, what was it, right before the 76ers game, and I really thought he was going to play. I was like, this guy's out here warming up, and he was warming up early, which is usually a telltale sign, because they all have their individual slots of when everyone warms up, and he's usually towards the end, right before Pritchard, as the
and he comes out to a big ovation. He loves it.
Pumps his fist.
It's great to see,
But he was warming up right as we were getting out of the press conferences, so about an hour and 45 minutes before the game, which is really early for him. And that's usually a telltale sign that somebody's trying to test it out to see if they can play. They're not going to put him out there if they didn't know he wasn't nearing it a little bit. Obviously, we didn't really see him warm up today, but he was here early. He was in the locker room. Obviously, we heard he was hacking up a lung. So it is something to watch, but hearing that from him, you hear that it's not something they really don't know what it is. That's a little concerning, but just it seemed there'd be a little bit of optimism with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I said, if Porzingis is right, this team, 7 games, any team in the Eastern Conference you think can take them the distance other than Cleveland? And, I still personally need to see it from Cleveland, right? I know that they've had an amazing regular season here, but I don't know, man. Beating this team 4 times with a healthy Porzingis is going to be so difficult.
I mean, everyone knew it going into the year. The 3 things that they'd be battling the most was health, human nature, and complacency. And so far, they've done a great job navigating that front. They've been banged up. Obviously, they used a ton of starting lineups at the beginning of the year. Jalen's dealt with things. Sam Hauser, who we saw how important he is to the team tonight, he's been dealing with the back injury. Kristaps obviously been in and out of the lineup. Drew, he's had a couple different things. He had the shoulder, and now he's got the finger. So the health hasn't been perfect. But as we're getting ready towards the playoffs, 17 games left after tonight, they're starting to get healthier. And now they have a large sample size from last month where they were all able to play together, where they had the starting lineup for most of it. And obviously they had some kinks to work through. We remember going back to that malaise they had was they kept talking about the starting 5 reacclimating together. And that's true. I think people look at it like, oh, these guys spent 101 games together last year. How are they not acclimated to each other? Well, they had the same exact roster. They brought back the same team. So all this film is out on them, and teams are gearing up to compete with Boston. If you looked at the storage and if there was the phone has the time watching stuff.
Yeah.
If you got that from the NBA teams, it'd be Boston Celtics film would be number 1 because that's where teams are trying to be. That's if you are getting to where you want to be, that's the team you're going to see. So they're watching film all year on the Celtics, and the book's kind of out. And then it's up to the Celtics to adjust to how teams are different regarding them now. And it took them a little bit to do that. But now they're back. And it obviously didn't help that the team couldn't hit a shot for 8 weeks.
Right. No, and the reacclimation thing, yes, they played a ton of basketball together last season. But when you're working through all these different lineups early in the year, and then here you go, guys, you're all back together.
Right.
There is a little bit of a kink that needs to get worked out there because one guy's getting used to shooting X amount of shots or running these types of plays. And it's you got to get back in that groove. Reps are the most important thing in sports. So as they can get more and more reps together, that's when things are going to start to click. And I think we've gotten to the point in the season where the lineup that is going to be the main lineup for the postseason run, they've played enough together now where they're playing really good basketball.
And I just want to give one more thought before we get out of here. I think they're about to turn off the lights on us. The ice is coming down. They're getting ready for Brad Marchand. He's not going to play, but he's coming back with the Panthers tomorrow night.
So
I wonder if they do. That is weird. I wonder if they'll do a tribute video. But we'll leave that to the skate pod to discuss. I want to give one more thought on this real quick, and it's really minor. But Baylor Shireman impressed me again tonight. Came in, first possession he was in, he had a steal. He took a charge. It was later overturned, and it was called a defensive foul. He didn't have the proper positioning. I didn't really agree with it. I thought he was in position for a charge, but I really like how he plays. I like how he hustles. He had a couple of nice passes today, was moving the ball around. He looks really comfortable, and he was one of the older prospects. I believe he's 24. He was a fifth-year senior coming out of Creighton, so he's a little bit older, a little bit more mature, and I think it fits the Celtics more because he has that experience. He can fit in. There's not as much growth, and there's still growing pains. He spent a lot of time in Maine. He's doing a great job there, but he's impressed me with his more minutes over the last week or so here.
Yeah, I think when they drafted him, everyone kind of just assumed, oh, he's going to be a three-point specialist and he's going to be a part of the lineup immediately. Right. And that didn't happen. And I think people are generally down on him as fans, right? But like you mentioned,
2 of his first 17 threes.
Exactly. So that's expected, right? But he's kind of finding his role. And I think that's important for a young player when, look, the thing that you do at a high level in college, if that doesn't translate right away, generally that can sink a guy. Right. And then they just fall completely out of the rotation. Now you're seeing a guy that's hustling and playing good defense and doing all the little things. That's going to help him get minutes here as we go into the postseason if the Celtics do need that depth. I don't think he's going to be a part of the playoff rotation.
The top 9 is the top 9.
Right. And but let's say 2 guys go down in a series. Right. That's when you're going to start to see a guy like
It's more so with an eye towards next year. Because we know there's inevitable changes coming to the roster. And with Baylor Shireman, there's guaranteed money that comes with first-round picks. And for this team against the cap, I thought all summer they were going to trade the pick. I didn't think there was a chance in hell they picked in the first round because of that guaranteed money that comes with it. But they did, and clearly they see something in him, and I think we're really starting to see the vision. And Joe Mazzulla stresses all the time that if you want to play as a young player, you have to do those little things. You got to defend. You can't be defined by scoring, especially on this team when you got all these different scorers. So I've been really impressed, and I've been impressed with this homestand, and I'm looking forward to Wednesday night against Oklahoma City. That's going to be a good one, and that's a big test for the Celtics. I mean, they've really turned it around a little bit here. They're 5-1 on the homestand, doing a great job taking care of business at home, but they got to do it against Oklahoma City, and that's going to be a fun one. We'll be back with you on Wednesday night following the game with another recap video. I don't know if we have a name for these yet, but we're going to find one. Again, I'm Justin Turpin. That's Tom Carroll. Thank you guys for hanging out, and we will talk on Wednesday night.